Hi, my name is Sheldon Manning, and I'm interviewing my mother for the KCP Social Practice and I Project. What is your name?
Sherry Manning,
How old are you?
45.
All right, start the interview. Um, First question that I wanted to ask you is that what role do you play in your community? Like, what is the role that you have in your community? How do you contribute?
Well, I contribute to my community by helping out my Auntie Brenda during her clothes giveaway. My Auntie Brenda is a strong advocate of her church, so I do take part in helping her um, provide clothes and food for the homeless. I think that's a great idea to do, a great thing to do for people is to help them get clothes, homeless people get clothes and get fed. So I make sure that I clean out my closet, make my sons clean their closets out, so I can give their old clothes, not bad clothes, to the homeless.
I like that. That's your idea of of a community. But I feel like I wanted to ask you, what do you think the general idea is of a community? What do you think the general definition of a community is?
The general definition of a community is a community that comes together to help one another and to help one another in time of need, to have a strong neighborhood, a safe neighborhood, and to look out for one another.
Mm. Have you ever been impacted by your community? Has something ever inspired you? Something ever like made you?
Well, I've been in Chicago all my life. I've been impacted in negative and positive ways in my community. Um, I think I am a, I think I'm watchful and see how things are in my community. I think that I could do better in helping my community.
You mentioned Chicago. Would it be different if you lived in another city, another state? Do you think you would have a different role in a different community? Do you think you would be? How do you think you would figure out?
I don't really know. I've been in Chicago, so um, I don't think I would do anything or live any differently in a different place, or I would be a different or on a different platform in my community if I was in a different place. I think I still would trying to help feed the homeless or trying to clothe or feed the homeless, or even trying to help people in my community. I don't think it would be any different.
Um, Chicago. Uh, how would you? Is anything that you would change in your community? Like, is there anything that you think needs to be done in your community?
I think we need more positive male role models in our community to help out with our young men. I think that if it was more of positive role models um, in the community, that was it would help out a lot.
Okay, and how would you? How would you? What role would you play in to have making that happen? How would you? How would you? How would you fix that?
I guess I would. Well, I have put positive role models in my son's life. I think I would have to just talk in my neighborhood and talk in my job, and to just ask questions as to um, ask questions of men that I see or anybody that see just doing good, to talk to my sons or talk to young men that I see trying to waver to the left to make them go to the right.
Do you feel like Chicago is your community, or do you have a specific area that you call your community?
No, I think Chicago is my community. I love the city of Chicago.
Okay, so how do you think others view Chicago? How do you think others view your community?
I think people. I don't know. I've been working around people that live in different parts of Chicago. A lot of people think that certain areas of Chicago are bad, but I've lived in the worst areas of Chicago, and I haven't seen, and it's impacted me in positive and negative ways. So I don't think people view Chicago as a good place. I will hope they do.
If they were to think that Chicago was a heavily violent city filled with crimes, how would you change the way they thought about the city? How would you?
I would say, talk to me about how I grew up in Chicago, and the fact that I'm raising two young men in the city of Chicago. That violence is everywhere. It's not just in Chicago. It's all around us. You're just going by what the media is telling you. But if I can raise two young men in Chicago and have them turn out to be okay young men, then so can anybody else.
Okay. Chicago is, as you know, is filled with a lot of violence statistically. Do you think? Um, do you think like Chicago violence compares to other cities? Violence. Do you think Chicago is like in a league of its own with violence, or do you think it compares with other cities as it pertains to violence and crimes and killings?
Well, I think a lot of cities are not. It's not just Chicago. It's some. I mean, Chicago does have to step up, trying to help bring the crime rate down. I think that we could do better in our community as far as helping Chicago get off that the one of the most highest crime cities. I think that it's not a bad city, but it's not a good city either.
So with that statement, like if you were to sit down with your community, what is like three main things that you would address with them that you think are like major issues in Chicago?
Need to have more, again, more positive role models, male positive role models. Number one. Number two, they need to have more going to the family homes and figure out what's going on in the family homes with these young men. Want to be outside, and make sure the kids are going to school. They need to really crack down on the parents, make sure their children are in school, and make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to do in school. Education is important. I think they should be more. Chicago need to be more focused on educating our young children. I think education helps a lot. Ignorant is a bliss.
Sounded like more than three, but I like that you feel that way about your city, your community. If you were, say, like you were in the media and you want to change the way how people look at Chicago, because certain people look at Chicago like it's just one of the worst cities in America. A lot of people do. If you were if you were like a media person, how would you change the perception of Chicago? How would you make Chicago look to other people outside of the city, outside of your community? How would you make your community look to other people? How would you change the perception?
I don't think I could change the perception. They would just have to just live in Chicago and see for themselves and pick an area in Chicago they choose to live. I don't think I could change someone's perception. If they came and sat down and talked with me, I can tell them how I feel about Chicago, and they may not, and they may feel differently, but I can't change someone's perception. I can just tell them how I lived my life in Chicago.
Would you show anything to make them change their perception if they do feel that way?
No, I'm not. I'm not gonna be their tour guide. I was just sit down and talk to them. I'm not gonna try and change their perception.
Um, in the future, um, how do you feel? What do you feel like Chicago will be like in the future? Say 10 years from now. Um, what do you how do you see Chicago? How do you view Chicago 10 years from
I
now?
think Chicago will be all right. There's always going to be crime because it's a large city. You just got to be more vigilant and protect yourself. And but I truly think Chicago will be okay. Just got to be to stand strong and be more involved in your community to help us to help Chicago stay strong.
Say if within these 10 years that Chicago starts going downhill, can this you do you think this can be prevented?
Uh, I think so. We had a good mayor, a good chief of police, and good community role models. I think we could. I don't think it'll fall to the side.
Um,
Chicago is not the worst city.
what questions do you want King as a high school or just any other person to ask your community?
What can we do to help our young men stay in school? What can we do to help our young men stay in school? Um, what type of groups are out there to help keep the men off the street? What is can we get a stronger gun policy? Those are a few questions I could think of right now.
How do you feel about gun control in Chicago?
I think the laws need to be tougher on gun control. We should have tougher laws.
Do you feel like, is there anything, do you feel like you have a problem with like any like the justice system in Chicago, like the police department, anything else like the fire department, anything?
I think it's a lot of racial profiling, but I haven't been profiled. But I do think it's a lot of racial profiling with the CPD, police department. But I haven't been racially profiled. I think that should be looked into a little bit more better.
Would you growing up in Chicago, would you have anything differently? Would you change anything about how you grew up in Chicago? Would you?
No, I had a fun childhood. I didn't, it is what it is. I grew up in Inglewood. I had all sets of my grandparents. They took care of me. My mom and dad took care of me. I had 2 working parents, so I wouldn't do anything differently.
Do you think your community back then, like Inglewood, you think that community was? What did
I
you
think
feel
it was
about
a
that
stronger
community?
community. We kind of, it's like it takes a village to raise a child. So we had a lot of people that looked out for us and make sure we were in school. They called parents when they saw your child leaving school or ditching school. It's like more of an old school thing. So
Compared to the like community in Inglewood back then, how do you think it compares to today's perception of community of Inglewood? Do you think is there anything different? Do you think it's the same? Has it always been the same?
of course it's changed over time. A lot of it's younger parents out there. Older generation are kind of getting tired. A lot of younger grandparents, younger parents, and no one's really sitting down talking to our children the way they should. So yes, times have changed.
Um, you have any other things you wanted to say about your community? Um, like where do you work? I think they would like to know that you have made a large role in your community. You are a
I currently work for Chicago Public Schools. I work with special need children, so with the severe and profound. Um, Children that come in there with trachs, and I've been to several funerals because these are severe and profound children. Um, that's one way I love my job. I've been at working for CPS for over 10 years. So that's another way that I do give back to the community.
okay. Um, um, do you think? I think that's all I wanted to ask you for this evening. Um, do you think this interview was successful?
Yes, it made me think a lot about what I need to do better in my community. So yes, it made me it put a lot more on my mind about what I need to do more of in my community.
Do you think interviewers such as myself should step out of just like family members and start talking to members in outside the community, people that we don't know that also live in our community? Do you think that should happen? Like, what do you think?
I think yeah, you should talk to other people that you don't know and see how they feel. They may I know pretty sure everybody has their own set of opinions. You should talk to somebody that's been impacted by um, gun violence. Talk to somebody that has not been impacted by it, that's lived in a good neighborhood all their lives and don't know what it's like to have violence. You know that you get completely different answers. I myself have been impacted by gun violence. Had several family members to get gunned down in the streets of Chicago. So my outlook on Chicago is different from someone who has not been impacted by gun violence. So yeah, everybody has a different opinion.
Well, thank you for your time, Mother. Very nice interview, and yeah, that's it.
Okay.